You will probably never have a good relationship with food, and unfortunately, there is a massive industry that has been created around the promise that you will. In fact, even that phrase, healthy relationship with food, is part of that machine. Between the books, courses, coaches, gurus, and of course, podcasts, we are constantly inundated with promises that all of our health and fitness goals are just on the other side of healing this relationship, like this weird mythical place that once you arrive, it'll all be better. And while it is nice to hear that in theory, it is the premise that lies underneath that that should worry you. Because if you can't heal it, then who do you think is left to blame? I'm sure this thought alone is very unsettling to a lot of you. Perhaps to some of you, it sounds a bit discouraging. Oh, Andrew says I'm never going to be able to eat like a normal person again. And I promise that's not what I'm saying. At least not to everybody. What I am saying is this. There is a group of people, maybe you're one of them, who will never cross that bridge into the magical eat whatever you want and just listen to your body world. I'm saying that some of you will be able to, and it's probably going to be a lot easier than you expect. And I'm saying that regardless of which side of this you fall on, there's really exciting news that once I personally discovered it, I found it to be freeing. So if you have heard about how important your relationship with food is, you've tried to heal that relationship with food, and now you're sitting here wondering, why does this keep falling flat? I have great news. You're not broken. You're not alone. You're listening or seeing somebody who is and has been on both sides of this. Obviously, a lot of my content is just me diving into research and breaking it down, but given the more complex nature of some of this stuff, with it being a little bit more emotionally driven, I did want to get a second opinion in some areas so that I could defer to a professional. So for this episode, I'll have some professional insights sprinkled in from
Ashley Hunsaker, licensed marriage and family therapist, and I own Center for Holistic Psychology.
So with all that out of the way, guys, I'm finally back. Let's get into it. Somewhere in the 2010s, people became obsessed with this idea of the relationship with food that we all have. And I think that primarily spawned in a very well-meaning way, as most things do. However, this came out of the body positivity and healthy at every size movement, which I do have an older video on, episode 49. The audio isn't the best, but I'm very proud of the content of it. It might sound strange to say this, but I don't think this concept could have come about at any other time, because think about what was happening in 2010. Most of the participation trophy kids, which I was one of, were all graduating high school. The children of all the almond moms were finally adults. Therapy culture was on the rise. People were actually acknowledging that mental health has these massive sweeping implications for not just individuals, but society as a whole. We were socially just at a point where people were being a little bit softer with things that maybe at one point seemed a little more cut and dry. So what did that give rise to? First, we need to clarify something. One thing that people have a lot of trouble acknowledging is that when something reaches the mainstream, it is rarely because it isn't working for some people sometimes. And there's absolutely a portion of the population who are or were anorexic, bulimic, or obese because of underlying mental health conditions. And there are some who did it when they realized that it was serving some kind of purpose, which is a whole can of worms on its own. Some people adopt things because of social reasons. Some people do it for others. Every food-related disorder is not just because of how somebody was raised. However, as is tradition,
as of course is tradition,
the solution in this case, therapy culture, ended up getting adopted into the mainstream, and what began as a treatment for some fringe groups or some fringe disorders became this broad brush frontline treatment for anyone and everyone who had any kind of a weight or physique related goal. It has been so broad brushed that even people who are professional athletes, professional bodybuilders, professional powerlifters, people who were driving toward a goal went from being seen as somebody who has a serious dedication to their craft to someone who, oh my gosh, they don't know that they're coping with some kind of disorder from their childhood. Like, we went from people with capital T trauma who were using or avoiding food as a coping mechanism to people thinking that all physique-related goals are just steeped in trauma. We went from people who were getting relentlessly fat-shamed or skinny-shamed and bullied throughout all of their school years to people who just had their senile grandma call them chubby one time and they decided to make that their entire personality.
Are you calling me fat?
And to be clear, it's not that you can't go too far in the right direction, as Ashley and I cover here.
Where do you feel like that line is for people when it comes to discipline versus disorder? I mean, you've obviously got those people who go way, way over the top where it's like, I don't drink, but I don't drink because I just never have. There's other people where it's like, I don't drink because it's extra calories and I'm not going to eat any of these foods and I'm going to be up at this time to go work out and I'm going to, X, Y, Z. There's always like something else going on there. And there can be a line where people go too far. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at disordered behavior, we have to look at, is it like affecting your global functioning? So it's like, and that's with anything, even with eating. Like if you're spending so much time consumed with, hey, what am I going to eat, that it's affecting other things in your life, that's when we're like, okay, like maybe this is something that we need to look at.
Maybe this is wishful thinking, but I'm a little more inclined to think that athletes, as outcome-focused people, would probably be a little more willing to pivot if worse outcomes from certain behaviors and coaching styles were showing up though. But with how these things are viewed socially, this shouldn't be surprising. Think about how we define healing your relationship with food. It's either this more clinical, psychologically based definition around eating disorders. It's more structured like a rehab model, maybe even feels a bit medical at times. Or it's this more wellness, pop nutrition, dietitian adjacent style language that's a little more common in blogs and podcasts and with health and fitness influencers. It's like more of a self-regulation model where it's almost just assumed that people can correct these things just by tuning into how different foods make them feel. And look, I have made content and coached on both of these styles to some degree. In fact, a good chunk of what I learned at the Czech Institute was a pretty even mixture of these things. But while both have their place, the problem is that neither really seem to address food addiction or the possibility that there is no light at the end of the tunnel. One feels so clinical and detached while the other is honestly bordering on too optimistic sometimes. Almost like there is this single thing that can be targeted as the cause. It's like seeing a wound and thinking, oh, we just got to stop the bleeding. That's the problem here. With both of these, a lot of people will lose all hope if they end up reaching that endpoint. They see it's a dead end and they go, wow, turns out it wasn't just that one thing. This is where one of my primary issues with the relationship with food as a concept comes up. You cannot quantify a relationship. If you go out on a date with your husband or wife and it's a good time, you can assume that your relationship will be a little more harmonious for a period of time. You cannot, however, say, oh, my relationship is now 20 points better, and that's going to give us 2.5 days of marital bliss. In the same vein, someone cannot look at a person's relationship with food and tell them for sure, hey, here's what's going good, and here's what's going bad, and here's what you need to change to optimize this. You, or they, can at best give some feedback from what they might be able to infer about other relationships that they have seen. You can also eat really well for your goals, feel smooth sailing for a period of time, see some obvious markers of a good relationship with food developing, but can you measure out the physical reversal of the damage, so to speak, done from years prior? No. So here's where this starts to get fucked up. This is a one-sided relationship. You cannot blame food the way you can blame your ex because, oh, they were a narcissist, even though it's kind of your fault for ignoring all the red flags in the beginning that you knew were going to be the reason that you broke up. So if it's not the food's fault and the relationship isn't getting better, and your guide, therapist, coach never said that they could, quote, fix you, because all they can really do is guide you toward healing, then the only person to blame is you. When somebody hires a surgeon to fix a knee, we know they failed if the knee doesn't work. Same with oil changes, same with a dog walker. It is clear when a job is complete because it is black and white and the provider's service is clear. There is no third party, you, to complicate things. And you, I don't mean this sarcastically, are one of the most complicated things in the entire universe. Your beliefs, your experiences, loves, hates, memories, motivations, successes, failures, you are not as simple as take oil out, put oil in, add filter. So I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to let this hang in the air until the end. Even if you could, how would you know if you had healed your relationship with food? Everybody always wants to argue the semantics of food addiction and emotional eating when it comes to this topic and act like, oh, this is such a robust talking point. Nobody can find their way around this. They are two completely different things. Emotional eating. Wow, I had a hard day at work. I'm gonna go get some ice cream later. Food addiction. I have diabetes. I'm gonna go eat a tub of ice cream and Raisin Canes today. Oh, but Andrew, that's not the real definition of food addiction. The 11-point criteria for addiction is as follows. Using a substance in larger amounts or for longer than desired. Do I even need to explain how that applies to food? A desire to cut down or control use, but it's unsuccessful. Do I need to explain how that applies to food? Spending a lot of time using or recovering from use. I suppose that one's a little bit more complicated, but I suppose we could make that argument. Craving or a strong desire or urge to use the substance. Do I need to explain how that's related? Failure to fulfill major role obligations at work, home, or school due to use. Again, that one's a little more complicated, but maybe. Continuing to use despite having persistent social or interpersonal problems. Has anybody ever known somebody who kept eating despite the fact that they were overweight and it was starting to affect them socially? Giving up or reducing important activities due to substance use. I mean, I think everybody knew a kid growing up who would only swim with his shirt on. Using in physically hazardous situations. Probably not that. Continuing to use despite knowing of a physical or psychological problem. Yes. Physical dependence. Yes. I mean, I feel like everybody knows somebody who, once their favorite foods were taken away or it was acknowledged to some degree that they had a problem, they had an emotional or physical reaction kind of like that of a withdrawal. Usually, I will say it's a little bit more anger-based though. But again, you can actually have physiological dependence on foods. It's just not quite as obvious. Tolerance, need for increased amounts to achieve the same effect. Do people who use food as a coping mechanism eat more food as they continue to gain weight and their, quote, tolerance goes up? Yes. Withdrawal symptoms upon reduction or cessation of use. Kind of. There's some interesting things about how, almost like the inverse of this, which is that when people will stop eating a lot of processed foods, they will start to regain sensitivity in their taste. So it's almost like, the opposite of a withdrawal symptom. I realize most of those examples are obesity related, but the simple fact is that more people are obese than there are starving in the world. Given that, it means overeating is the most common bad relationship with food, so to speak, meaning it is the result of the most common eating disorder. And my theory is that the only reason we can't call it addiction is because it is the only thing we cannot fully abstain from. You must learn moderation or else. When somebody has any other substance abuse problem, do we pepper them with all the benefits of moderation, or do we say, hey, you have to quit that shit, period? But here's where we hit another little snag. Not a logical snag, but a social, emotional one. I really do believe that if we went and asked every American to name a list of good foods and bad foods, then let them look at each other's lists, we would probably agree, I would say at least 80%.
Hey, this is Editing Andrew. I actually decided to send that question out to all my followers, and wouldn't you know it, pretty much everybody agrees on generally what constitutes as being a good food and a bad food. Look at that. Look on screen. Crazy. Anyway, okay, let's get back to the video.
Nobody looks at most processed foods and thinks this is good for me, with the caveat of foods that are heavily marketed as health food by putting keto, high protein, low fat, whatever. I can understand why those things can trick the average consumer, but when I say bad foods, there is inevitably some midwit who wants to go, well, actually, there's no such thing as bad foods because all he's looking for are the few exceptions versus the rule that has dictated nearly all of human existence. Eat things that you can grow or kill. I don't care that you can grow poisonous food. I'm obviously not talking about that. I'm at a point where I don't even necessarily think of the naturalistic fallacy as a fallacy anymore. It is probably right a lot more than it is not. Look, before I get too deep into my own opinion on this, I mean, honestly, we're probably already there, but I wanted to hear what Ashley had to say from the clinical side of things.
In my industry, and probably yours as well, there's this huge push to not stigmatize or moralize around foods. What's been your opinion about the whole good foods, bad foods debate.
See, and I'll say I don't personally even look at it that way, even in my practice. What the way that we would look at it if someone came in with some sort of like disordered eating would be, for me in particular, would be, hey, like what kind of activities do you like doing? How do we nourish our bodies to be able to do the activities that we like doing? So, I mean, if you're going to go for a 5 mile run, eating 2 hamburgers at In-N-Out beforehand might not make you feel the best. Maybe it does. I don't know. Like, let's explore that. So I think that that's really where I go towards is like, hey, what do you like to do? Cool. How can we nourish our bodies to make sure that your body is able to make that happen?
So it's more so about like the connection
Totally.
that they're experiencing and like what that individual experience is, as opposed to just the blanket statement of like, this is how, food and exercise and all these different things should be for you.
Right. Yeah. Along with all the other things, right? Like sleep,
Oh yeah.
making sure we do all the things. Eating is just another component of that.
For a lot of people, this will be an easy enough way to think about it. Me, however, a bad food generally, God, I fucking hate caveating this shit, is going to be foods that have more cons in the short or long term. A Slurpee is a bad food. Anyone who disputes this probably has an IQ number that is equivalent to whatever a recent temperature was in London. The only benefit from it is the pleasure that they might get from it. And I will not make a drug analogy quite yet because it's a little too on the nose, especially given that one of them is bought behind the 7-Eleven and the other one is bought at the checkout. Granted, some of them can both be bought at the checkout in certain neighborhoods. A bad food is a food that is not satiating. It will make you want to eat more. It will spike or crash your blood sugar. It is any food that doesn't align with your goals, whether that is weight related or wellness related, in the case of some foods causing my eczema to flare up, for example. I cannot believe the audacity that some people have to still play this, well, what about game? Do I even need to explain what good foods are, or is this phrase maybe good enough? Don't you know it when you see it? It's foods that are around the perimeter of the grocery store. It's foods that existed in some form 1,000 years ago. It's foods that you can grow or kill. It is foods that an 8-year-old can look at and tell you every single ingredient. And for some people, there is no moderating bad food. Some people are me as an 11-year-old kid crushing 3 trays of Oreo a week. I do not possess moderation with food. I could maybe develop that skill, or I can apply that mental bandwidth elsewhere and just say, this food isn't good for me. Like you, whoever's watching, and put a comment down for this. Aren't there foods that you just know aren't good for you? So if they aren't, how long do you intend to tempt fate and just keep spinning that wheel and eating it again and eating it again, knowing that it isn't? There's an old joke that goes something like, I'm allergic to alcohol. I always break out in handcuffs. The funniest thing about when I wrote this line down, I looked up to see who the quote was, and it's actually Robert Downey Jr. I don't know if he's the originator, but yeah, funny nonetheless. To use that example a little more, I have a friend who drinks alcohol, but that's not her vice. It's cigarettes. She told me that for some reason, she always smokes when she drinks, but she only drinks when she goes out, but she only goes out with one specific friend. So here's where it starts to get a little wacky. When she started offering alternate plans with that person, instead of going out, she realized that that person was just a drinking buddy. That relationship fizzled out and she quit smoking. Sometimes your environment and the accessibility of your vice is just as important as every other factor. That is literally why I don't keep Oreos in my house. I actually have a rule that I can eat them. I just can't keep them in my house. Like maybe that seems ridiculous to people, but think about it. If it's, 9 o'clock at night and I'm really craving an Oreo, I'm not going to the grocery store. I would gladly walk into my kitchen. Just creating rules around my environment has done almost all of the heavy lifting for me. I don't have self-control, but in this case, I don't need it. And my friend also didn't have self-control, but again, she didn't need it. Your relationship with food almost doesn't matter if you just put some simple barriers in the way. But is there something to be said for the idea that this is just willpower? Is this simply a skill that one must strengthen?
With the relationship with food, a lot of people, this is more so when it comes to somebody who is like overweight and, putting this in air quotes, can't lose weight.
Sure.
A lot of people will just poke at that as this is a self-control issue. This isn't an issue with foods. This is just, you need to like grow that muscle, so to speak, and be able to like exert more control over yourself. What do you think about that?
I think that's really hard for a lot of people. I mean, again, like I think we're looking at so many different layers of things over the course of someone's life that is impacting this relationship with food. Again, like the parent thing. I mean, even if we look at maladaptive like coping skills, so someone that maybe turns to food when they aren't feeling well, emotionally, not physically, maybe physically, but I'm mainly talking about emotionally.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think that it depends. I think a lot of people use eating because it feels good, right? Like picking up a pack of Oreos and eating Oreos, I think for some folks feels great. Like that's gonna be the part of the day where they actually have like a moment where they're like, cool, like I'm feeling all right now.
Yeah.
But again, like this is so individualized to each individual person. Like for me, I would never pick up a pack of Oreos and be like, yeah, like this is gonna make me feel great. In fact, that would make me feel terrible. So
Right.
just like and it's different, right? Like my upbringing was a lot different. My mom was interesting with food in many different ways. Like, she went through different like diet type things and all these different things. So I have a lot of like different thoughts flowing through my brain about food. But really what it comes down to, I've kind of like steered the direction of like my own path of like, again, like unprocessed food makes me feel great. I'm able to do the things I want to do when I eat that way.
I don't want any of this to sound hopeless, and I don't think that it comes across that way. I really don't. But socially, we have been taught so consistently that there is this light at the end of the tunnel. Professional help with a therapist does have its place, but what is there to be said for those whom it still isn't enough?
Let's say somebody's done years of therapy. They've done gut protocols. They've journaled about this. They've done intuitive eating. They've done all these different things to try to fix that relationship with food. And they are still just at a point where there are certain foods and certain styles of eating that just cause them to spiral. Is there a point where it's going to be beneficial for some people to just say, you know what, I just simply cannot eat this way. I have to have all these hard limits.
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably not going to eat, quote, normal the way that the average person in the United States does.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what you're talking about right now is like some level of like self-awareness, like knowing our limits. And I think that that's okay, right? It's like if we're looking at like someone with trauma, right? And we've done like a lot of like exposure therapy with them. Maybe they get to the point where they're like able to function and not get triggered by certain things, but there's this one thing, maybe this one scent of cologne where they're like, no, like I know like if I smell that, that's gonna like put me back into this trauma state. And I think that it's kind of like similar, right? It's like, yeah, we can like create a lot of this self-awareness around food or trauma, our past trauma, whatever it is. But I think there's still gonna be those connections in our brain that are so strong that it's like, this is a hard limit for me. And I think that that's okay, right? Like I know for myself, I have hard limits too, not surrounding necessarily food. Well, yeah, surrounding food and other things where I'm like, yeah, no, like that's not something I want to engage in, or that's not something that I want to have in my life for a host of different reasons.
All right. What do you think acceptance looks like for a person in that case? They've, let's say, kind of come to that conclusion of like, all right, there just are certain things certain foods or activities that I cannot engage in because, it sets this off or however you'd like to word it. What does accepting that look like for a person?
I think just that, knowing that, having that self-awareness again, like I think we're really talking about being self-aware right now, of like, hey, yeah, like this is a no for me.
How do you think someone would know if they've hit that line? Because when if somebody's just constantly getting peppered with like, heal your relationship with food, and they hear that from fitness influencers and they hear that from, therapy accounts, and they read that in all these books, and, there's kind of always for them maybe chasing this, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. How do they know? And probably a lot of this would be like working with a therapist.
Right.
But how would somebody know like, all right, maybe I'm just going to be the person that it doesn't get better for. And I just have to implement these tools and kind of make peace with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a parallel process to even looking at like maybe anxiety and depression, right? It's like we get to the point where it's like, yes, we've done all this work with our therapist, this internal work, inside and outside of the therapy room, where we get to the point and where it's like, hey, yeah, I'm Ashley, I have anxiety, and this is the way that I navigate life with it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a parallel process.
Just slowly, progressively kind of facing it and going, all right, here we are. Now what?
Yeah, learning about yourself. It's a piece. It's not who you are, but it's a piece of like, hey, like this is me, and this is the way I navigate this situation.
So to really wrap this up, what if this all fails? Professional help fails. Therapy doesn't get you eating donuts in moderation the way you would like. The magic supplements don't regulate your cravings. The specialists ultimately turn up nothing for you. Then what? Is this just your fault? Did you not try enough? Is there more trauma that you're going to need to unpack? Are you too weak-willed? What if the answer to all of those things is yes? What are the drawbacks in just accepting that? Bam, you're weak-willed. Bam, you have too much trauma. Bam, you will never fix this. Isn't that relieving? You can finally give up hope and move on. This is like the food version of an ex saying, yes, we will never get back together. I can't play the Taylor Swift song here, but imagine it for me anyway. No more desire that this be better. You're a failure. Hooray. This relationship with food is bad, and you are smart enough to see that. You have been so resourceful that you've hired various coaches and professionals, and they helped you realize that. You researched certain supplements, different methodologies, you tried out all these things and found out, these don't work for me. You learned that because you are such a diligent person. You got bullied a lot as a kid maybe, and it did leave a permanent scar on your heart in some way. And now you get to move forward with that information and live your life just like you would after any other bad relationship. And nobody who really understands what you have gone through and the effort that you put in would look at you and say, you're kind of failing this. It is just pragmatic. It's like leaving an abusive ex or family. You can leave, you can go no contact. You left your shitty job. You don't need to go back. Just like anybody with a substance abuse issue, you have realized moderation is not a choice for you. That is not a skill that you possess. It is for some, but it's not for you. And that's okay, because this is where the peace finally comes in. Once you stop chasing the version of you who can eat like a normal person, once you stop trying to earn your way back into the moderation club, once you stop fantasizing about the day you'll be healed enough to keep ice cream in the freezer and not binge, that's when you can finally breathe. There is so much peace on the other side of acceptance when you let go of the fantasy and choose structure, not out of fear, but out of respect. You stop waking up in shame. You stop negotiating with yourself every single time you open the fridge. You stop feeling like a failure just because you're different. Because maybe you'll never have a good relationship with food, at least not the one that Instagram keeps promising you. But you can have a clear one. You can have a truthful one. You can have a relationship that works. You can have a relationship that doesn't betray you, that doesn't gaslight you. A relationship that isn't promising you freedom, then leaves you spiraling in the pantry at midnight. So if nothing else sticks from this episode, let this part land. This doesn't mean that you are broken. You're just playing by a different set of rules. This isn't a curse. It's just the correct strategy given the cards that you were dealt. And this is how you play it right. Hey guys, it's been a while. I've actually been working on something pretty intensely, but I didn't mean to put this on the back burner for as long as I did. But I've talked a lot about how complicated it is for people who are just getting into the fitness industry now, because it's like you don't really know what is useful and what is bullshit. So I finally took the last decade plus of me coaching and training and being a consumer and compiled that all into a course. So you can find it down in the description. But yeah, this took a long time, and it is the first course that I've ever put together. So, if you guys want to support me, support the channel, and hopefully get some value out of it, it's the first of hopefully a few things that I'm going to iterate on and consistently try to improve for you guys. And The first 5 people who sign up for it, if you use code HM30, it's going to save you $30. And finally, guys, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I like kind of blew up on social media, which was weird. Not this fucking channel, unfortunately, but a personal one. So that ended up taking a lot of time while I was kind of figuring out how to navigate that. But, you know, we're locking back in. We're locking back in. We're going to make it happen here, guys. But yeah, I'm probably going to start making some long form content that is a little less fitness based on that other channel, which I will also have linked in the description. So I guess that's all, guys. Shout out to Ashley for helping out with this episode. If you are in California, she is licensed out there as an LMFT. And yeah, I think that's probably all I got, guys. I love you. Thank you for sticking around. And yeah, until next time, see y'all later.